How does an empire fall into such a difficult situation? And how does it rise again from that state? In fact, the New England Patriots have experienced perhaps the greatest comeback in football history in the last decade. Even the most painful farewells, and especially the birth of a new hope. Brady's last rings, Belichick's farewell, Drake May's true rise. In this video, we will list 10 critical moments that incredibly impacted Patriots history in the last 10 years. And I must say, the number one choice will likely spark a lot of debate. Before moving on to number 10, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we will continue to bring you content you'll love when the season starts. 10. Philly's damaged armor. In February 2018, America was waiting for its dynasty's 6th ring. Opposite them was backup quarterback Nick Foles, but there was something about that night. Malcolm Butler, who single-handedly saved the Super Bowl 3 years earlier, didn't take a single snap on defense. The reason is still not fully known today. Brady set a Super Bowl record with 505 yards, and it still wasn't enough. Furthermore, the Philly special officially went down in history. The Eagles won the game 41-33. So in the short term, it was a lost final. And in the long term, it could be considered the first major crack in what seemed like a perfectly flawless machine. Rumors of tension between Brady and Belichick were no longer whispers, but headlines. And as you can imagine, once the armor is broken, it can never be the same again. 9. A wrong rebuild. 5 years later, in the spring of 2021, Brady is gone, and Belichick is officially opening the coffers for the first time. Judon, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and then Mac Jones with the 15th pick in the draft. Initially, this seems to work somewhat. Results come in: a 10-7 record and a playoff spot. Then came that night in Buffalo. The Bills were finishing every offensive drive they started without even punt with a touchdown, making it 47-17. The following year, the offense was entrusted to Matt Patricia, who had a defensive background. Jones declined, and the season ended 8-9. In the short term, we could call it a failed experiment. However, in the long term, it marked the end of Belichick's untouchable status, and the hourglass began to tick. 8. The final victory. The date was February 2019, Super Bowl 53. Facing Sean McVay's league-shaking Rams offense, everyone expected a scoring show. In fact, Belichick planned the opposite. The Patriots defense put on a work of art that night. The Rams were limited to 3 points. Sony Michel ran the only touchdown of the game. Julian Edelman was named MVP. 13-3. The lowest scoring Super Bowl in history, and the 6th ring for the dynasty. Exactly. No one knew at the time, but this was the final photo of the peak. Weeks later, Gronkowski retired and lost his offensive identity. The Brady-Belichick partnership had signed its final contract, without even realizing it. 7. The heir's departure. 9 years ago, October 2017. News that shook the NFL emerged. The Patriots were trading future quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo to San Francisco for just a second-round draft pick. Of course, naturally, Belichick had been building his post-Brady strategy around Garoppolo for years. But the decision was clear. This team is Tom Brady's team. In the short term, the plan worked. 2 Super Bowl finals, another championship. Looking at it from a different angle, in the long term, the bill was heavy. When Brady left in 2020, there was no ready-made heir behind him. Garoppolo, on the other hand, carried San Francisco to a Super Bowl. A single trade, the fate of 2 franchises. And we are faced with a huge what-if question whose answer will never be known. 6. A virtual cultural revolution. In January 2025, Jared Mayo is fired after a single year following a 4-13 season. The franchise is in a state of disarray, and Robert Kraft finds the answer within the family. Mike Vrabel, who has won 3 Super Bowls with this team and been named Tennessee Coach of the Year. I want to emphasize that Vrabel immediately rewrites the standards. Josh McDaniels returns to lead the offense. Thus, physical football, discipline, and accountability return. In the short term, a coaching change. In the long term, the rebuilding of Patriot Way and the groundwork for May's resurgence. For the first time in years, Foxborough believes in a plan again. 5. Rising from the ashes. Last year, in the 2025 season, nobody really had high expectations because of the team's 13-4 record from the previous year. However, games started to be won in an interesting way, and New England went 14-3, then became the AFC East champion. They even jumped to the NFL record of 10 wins in a single season. Then, in the playoffs, the defense really spoke. Chargers 16-3, Texans 28-16, and a win in Denver secured the AFC championship. Of course, the Patriots made their first Super Bowl appearance since Brady's departure. But let's not forget that the fairy tale ended in Super Bowl 60, with the score becoming 29-13. May conceded 21 sacks in those playoffs, setting an unwanted NFL record. Of course, hearts were a little broken after that, but the message was clear. This team is back, and the window has opened. For the name of the miracle, 28-3. On February 5th, 2017, the scoreboard was truly brutal in the third quarter. Atlanta 28 and New England 3. Falcons fans had officially begun celebrating. However, Brady had no intention of stopping. With consecutive touchdowns and 2-point conversions, and of course, that legendary catch by Edelman that he saved by millimeters from the ground, James White crossed the line in overtime, making the score 34-28, and thus the first ever Super Bowl with the greatest comeback in overtime history was created. Brady broke the record with 466 yards and earned his 5th ring. So this championship also led to the emergence of another definition in the long run, because 28-3 had become a universal symbol of never giving up and formed the very DNA of the franchise. From then on, no game in New England could ever be considered over. 3. The future. 2 years ago, April 2024, draft night. Looking at the situation, Brady is gone. Belichick is gone. The franchise is at rock bottom and has the 3rd pick. Of course, New England doesn't give up. Drake May from North Carolina. Despite a chaotic 4-13 rookie season, May is selected to the Pro Bowl. And then in 2025, he explodes. 4,394 yards, 31 touchdowns, the league's best field goal percentage and rating. 2nd in the MVP voting. The first Patriots offensive player to be selected All-Pro since 2019. First and foremost, a draft pick. In the long term, he was forming the new axis of the franchise. Thus, for the first time in over 20 years, Foxborough is building a future around a new face. 2. The end of the empire, January 11th, 2024. With a press conference, we witnessed the end of an era. Bill Belichick and the Patriots are now parting ways. 24 seasons, 6 Super Bowls, the greatest coaching reign in modern NFL history. But let's not forget that after the 4-13 record and empty stands in 2023, the decision was inevitable. A farewell in the short term. A rewriting of the team's identity in the long term. Because, as you know, since 2000, everything on this team was decided by one man. Ironically, Belichick is now at the helm of North Carolina, May's school. And New England, for the first time in its history, is waking up to a future without both Brady and Belichick. 1. Farewell. 6 years ago, on March 17, 2020, a social media post marked the end of one of the greatest sports stories in the world. Tom Brady was leaving New England after 20 seasons and 6 championships. He went to Tampa, and in his very first year won a Super Bowl, sending a message to the world. In New England, the lights are now dimming. Cam Newton's 7-9 record, the first lost season since 2000, followed by Mac Jones and the 4-13 record. Of course, this farewell was an earthquake that reshaped the fate of the last 10 years. And Belichick's departure, May's selection, and even Vrabel's arrival were all attempts to fill that void. That's precisely why it's number 1, because everything truly began with that farewell. We've talked about these 10 critical moments, from the miracle of 28-3 to the Philly tragedy, or the last ring to the big farewells. And now, the biggest question on the table is, can Drake step out of his shadow and bring the 7th ring to this franchise? Now I want to leave the floor to you. Which moment do you think should be at the top, number 1? You can write your own ranking in the comments. By the way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because, as you know, there's only one rule in Foxborough, and it never changes. History is constantly being written here.